ready to go. I feel like I should have ran up there. I realized that that's a good opportunity for some Rocky music. So I also just recently put together in my mind, I heard a little bit about this was the siege that may not happen. And I just put it together. This is Lucky 13. So that's actually, there's a lot of impressive things. First, I want to say thank you very much to Andrew for inviting me back for a second time. I am deeply honored. Talking about things like production and leadership is something that I really care about. And getting an opportunity to do that with some people, some familiar faces and some new faces actually means a lot. And also, having a little bit of knowledge about organizing things and sort of producing things and project management to a limited degree, I am always impressed when something like this can happen, and doubly so when we do it on a compressed schedule. So good job, everybody, all the staff here and everybody. So we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm good? All right. We're going to talk a little bit, I had them pull out a new mic, and it works. It's just fine. So again, professionals. Can't do anything really good without them. We're going to talk about production. We're going to talk about producers, a little bit about what to expect, and also a little bit about how to make a good one. And if this is something that you're interested in, I'll have a couple sections at the end to talk about it. Who am I? I'm Nick Lang. I'm the senior publishing producer at Amazon. That basically means that it's my job to make sure that Amazon ultimately publishes and produces high quality games. Just now kind of getting our feet off the ground. I've been in game dev for about 20 years. My roots are in art and design. So what's interesting, I think, is a lot of people kind of assume that at a certain level we were all engineers. I slogged through some engineering work when I was younger, but it's been a long time. And my art degree helps me out zero there. If you go back far enough in my previous life, I was an illustrator. That's how far away from programming I am. I am passionate about potential. I am passionate about reaching potentials, individuals and teams. I love seeing experts realize how good that their best can be, and to see entire teams become greater than the sum of their parts. This takes a lot of magic and a lot of great leadership, and I don't think anywhere is this more relevant than in the role of producer. Real quick, I want to talk about spoons. Makes perfect sense. While I was writing this talk, I was realizing there was a common point, some common points and a common thread. What I wanted to call it out, but I didn't want to stop the talk along the way. Every time it comes up, I didn't want to sort of break the flow, if I actually do achieve any flow up here. When you see this spoon, keep it in the back of your mind throughout the deck. I'm sure that you're all memorizing all these slides, so just one more thing to memorize. And we'll connect the dots when we get there. Now when somebody comes in, they're going to not know what the spoons are, and we'll just laugh at them when it's time. All right, so let's get to real business. Let's talk about games. Who makes games? Who thinks it's an awful lot of work? Does anybody feel like it's maybe too much work, more work than you can handle? I think that we live a life where we're worried whether we ship or not, and we live a life where we slip dates, and sometimes it feels like we're working on a different product than our coworkers, the people right next to us. Some of these I'm actually quite proud of. So if I stop and I kind of take a look, that's a good one. Yeah, sometimes we're working on a product and the person right next to us, it feels like they're working on a completely different product. We've seen our games fall flat because the market didn't align, the vision didn't align, and sometimes we spend too much money. Most times we spend too much money. Sometimes we don't get enough investment. It's really hard to get, there's plenty of money in the business, but sometimes it feels really hard to get it. These are the issues that I want to talk about. We all want to make great games. I think production stands actually at the forefront of these things that I want to talk about. We all want to make great games, and we all want to do it on time. We want to do it within budget. We want to make sure that the tech and the art and the marketing and the design, the experience, they're all aligned. We want to do it again. We want to do it again. We want to do it again. We want to get better every time. We want... It's good. Just keep going. There's going to be one that you get. Everybody's going to get, I guarantee everybody will get at least one reference. I want to help you make excellent things. Excellent games, high quality games. This is a thing that I'm passionate about. I think teams, at their ultimate ability, are the ones that make excellent games. And I think we're going to start, or we are going to start, at understanding the role of the producer, something I think is crucial and a hub to this. So let's talk about games. Let's talk about the environment that we live in. Making games are complicated, very complicated. It's only getting more complicated. First game I worked on was 3 people in 6 months. Maybe that's still an indie world, but that was like a GBA game, which was like the number 2 platform in the world at the time. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of dependencies, and we're not talking about just code dependencies. It's bigger than that. It's not just software and code and engineering. It's marketing and PR. I'm going to keep repeating some of these words. These projects need a point where it all comes together, where we can all stay focused. Sometimes a team needs training wheels to keep this focus, their eyes on the prize, to see this quality out in front of them. I notice not everybody raised their hands that they make games. That's okay. I still love you. But I do kind of want to go through a little bit to talk about some of those difficult parts about making games, where I'm just going to kind of go through a whole bunch. These are things that I think about. So there's always technology, there's programming, there's hardware, there's things like live services, things like monetization plans that get built and that are technology, design, software. Also, they have to be vetted with finance departments. It all, of course, has to be designed. These designs need to be understood by marketing so that they can get the messaging right while they're working with their user research groups. And then, of course, when you've got that, you've got user research groups, and you've got millions of players, you've got databases to manage, you've got communities to manage, you've got licenses for software, for all sorts of things. You've got websites, good websites that need to be managed, also customer service that needs to be trained and needs to be always on the hook to be able to answer these questions that come through. And then all of it kind of gets this nice legal review over the top of it. Geopolitical concerns. We want to be careful about our obligations to our customers and our licensors. Where does all of this stuff merge? Where does all of this stuff come together? And during this merge, how does this team of experts, these people that love what they do, how do they stay focused on what they love, while at the same time they're all pointing at that broader goal, that high-quality product that we work together to happen? To be fair, it does not always take technical expertise. That's for Andrew. OG Star Trek, I will always have something in a presentation that has OG Star Trek. Not everything takes a technical expert or years of professional training. There is a certain amount of I've been there and I've done that helps a role like production. Our game projects, they need the support that comes out of this broad perspective, this knowledge and this wisdom and this experience. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is the producer. The point I'm trying to drive home is the producer standing in the middle of the maelstrom. He's keeping it together. They're holding basically the standard bearer. They're holding it all together, all these different inputs. Our modern game teams need clear collective centers. The lessons learned from these dynamics, sometimes these collisions between systems, disciplines, organizations, departments, especially when you work for really big companies. I got to tell the joke. I used to work for EA, and I was like, you know what I need is a bigger company. I need more people involved in the creation of art. I'm moving to Redmond. I worked at Microsoft for a while. I think that's about 100,000 people. It was pretty good. 5 years, though. I needed more people. More people make things more better. So now I work at Amazon. I think the last thing I heard was if you include the fulfillment centers, there's 650,000 people. I am desperately looking for that email alias that says "Dear all Amazon" or "Worldwide Amazon." I'm going to find it, and I'm going to email it from somebody else's machine. All these dynamics and these systems, these collisions, these things that happen between systems and departments, they're all made manifest in one role, the producer. This is a role that benefits the entire team from both an immersed perspective because they're familiar with the work that's happening, but also from a wide perspective. This perspective informs decisions across the project in a way that is unique to this role. Artists, engineers, designers, they're specialists, but the broadness that comes with production is unique to the role of producer. Basically, producer in most definitions means creator, but it's never in isolation. Producers should be accountable for the production of the multidiscipline output, our products, accountable for our products. Remember the roots in music. If you've ever kind of looked into where did game production come from, it's not film and it's not theater. Maybe that's what it's turning into, or maybe that's the easiest sort of shortcut that we make, but it comes from this guy, Trip Hawkins, one of the founders of EA. He's working with a group in the Ozarks making Mule and Hard Hat Mac, and what he found out was that he couldn't get the whole team of game makers to align, to deliver. They would slip dates, they would sort of meander on what the ultimate vision was, and when he tried to push them along with people that he thought were project managers usually, here's how we make software, here's how we push this stuff out, those people would get eaten up because they lacked the credibility of what a modern day producer has. So when he mentioned it to his friend, Jerry Moss, Jerry knew right away, you need a producer. This is a person at the mixing board. This person's calling the band on their BS. This person's giving advice, is vetoing stuff that doesn't align with the bigger vision. They help solve problems of audience, marketing, equipment, because they have that experience. Producers, music producers, are in no small way responsible for the success of people like Elvis or like Jerry Moss worked with the Beatles, or other more local bands that have a strong producer drive behind them. Maybe I shouldn't put that one in there. I think the end is always like this. This conversation always comes to producers are producing something bigger than any single achievement that they could achieve on their own, or any individual could achieve on their own. Like I mentioned, we want producers that are a hub between business, technology, marketing, design, operations, sales, project management, HR, and also an arbiter between all these, because often there are conflicts. Some people think about them operating as the Supreme Court. There's a veto opportunity there, but not necessarily a militant authority. I'll talk about that in a bit. A producer should understand and be able to articulate the why behind the what, and its place among the massive matrix of things that we just talked about. They should be able to understand these priorities of the project and the reasons that support these prioritizations. This is a complicated job because of the complicated scope of our games. Even small games have become very complicated. And a role like this will always include a certain amount of empathy and a certain amount of knowledge about the disciplines that go into create inputs into this project. A lot of people say facilitators. Anybody heard that before? What does a producer do? It's like a facilitator. I think that's fine. It's fair, but it's too broad. It's frankly limiting in the vision of what a real producer should do. When we call a producer a facilitator, we're sort of relegating it to assistant and a helper. Helping is noble. We should all do that. But it's off the mark if that's all we expect from the role of production. I mean, I've gotten plenty of sandwiches at lunchtime. I've cleaned up plenty of empty pizza boxes at the end of the night. Nobody should be above anything like that. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying it's not the key to the contribution we should expect from our producers. We should expect that our producers raise the level of our games, raise the level of our team, raise the level of our quality for this product. We want to make great stuff to entertain people. We have a job where all we need to do is make millions of people happy. That's pretty cool. Well, we need to keep raising that level up. We need to keep pushing on that, and I think that role kind of comes back to the alignment position of the producer. Facilitator is cool. I think it's fine. It's not completely wrong, and sometimes I even revert to that as well. But my favorite way to describe producers is that they should be agents of clarity because of their broad perspective, that they should be best positioned to help others understand the context. They're always ready to help with the bigger picture. This also gives them a certain amount of empowerment if they are this true broad spectrum producer. This role done properly, it's my first time, properly, should be multifaceted. It has a unique perspective that generates unique knowledge. This knowledge should be shared with the team and appreciated with the team, by the team. In fact, this expanded perspective, it's honed and it's sharpened by the professionals and the experts that surround this producer. And it will create a necessary empowerment and authority, but not an authority of militant control. It's not what we're talking about. This is an authority seen through this is not the authority seen through the lens of any single discipline. If you've ever worked on a team where, the artist was like, well, I can't make the art because I need 7 million polygons. That's the kind of conflict that I'm talking about. If they're in a position of ultimate authority, then that game ultimately never gets made, or it runs like crap. What we're looking for is an authority of perspective, of knowledge, and of wisdom. And I think this is a good thing because we want leaders with shared perspective and wide perspectives. I think this is a really important point. I think this is a point that maybe makes some people nervous when you talk about authority versus sort of like autonomy or everybody gets along and builds consensus. I'm not talking about the militant authority, do what I say or you get fired. That's not the point. The point is that there is somebody that has the perspective that is empowered to give the proper sort of direction. And I think about, does anybody in the military, anybody spend any time in some tanks? All right, so I was not, but I did get to spend a whole bunch of time in a tank for a student film. So that basically makes me an expert in tanks. Would you agree? No. Okay, no. All right. Well, we're going to go on anyway. No, actually, one of the things that I learned was I didn't even know how many people sat in a tank. I had no idea. There's four. There are these people, they all do different jobs. So we've got the driver, and we've got the gunner, and we've got loader, and the tank commander. These people are all experts in their job. The driver's not turning around telling the loader, hey, the third one down from the left is the good one, right? They've got responsibilities, they got expertise. However, the tank commander has a perspective. He's got the radio, and he's got the perspective. You can jump in. If I'm way off base, you say like, wasn't a tanker. Okay. Well, then spend time in tanks? So I am the expert.
Maybe not so much.
Probably not. All right, good. What I loved about this particular role is that tank commander, as you see him, he's sitting inside and that hatch is closed. On his back is a pad where if he sits up, that pad will snap up, and he can sit up to even higher because the role of being the tank commander is part and parcel to being able to see what's going on. He's the only one in that tank that actually has a seat like that that's available to him, because perspective is important when you're trying to align a group of experts to do a job. In this case, shoot giant guns at targets. Having this perspective means we should expect strategic, long-term, big picture thinking from our producers. So let's take a little sidebar, take a little break. I need to talk about this. A producer is not a project manager. And if you came to this talk thinking that I was going to talk about project management, I think you will be sorely disappointed. Also, I think if there was a keynote that talked about Excel spreadsheets and calendars, that would be a miss. I think project management is a valuable and crucial skill. And parts of my job require me to have knowledge about it. But I consider it a separate responsibility. So in this sidebar, we're going to talk about how it's worth talking about, because when you hear people talk about the role of production in games, they conflate it with that of a project manager. Often it's the same role. What do you do? Oh, I keep the schedule. If the only thing a person is responsible for is project management, then they are a project manager. If that is their only job, then that's what they are. Then that is what they are, not a producer. We live in a world where some people consider a producer's primary responsibility project management. If that's true, and the actual output of a person's actions are tracking effort, tracking work, a schedule, dependency matrix, collated risk registry, work breakdown structure, resource allocation, burn down charts, capacity plans, velocity reports, forecasting, more burn down charts, and sprint process documentation, these are the jobs of a project manager, not a producer. The person doing this work is a project manager. I don't think I can put too fine a point on it. They are doing project management. We'll take a break and say if any of that list that I just went over, it's not familiar with you and you work on a team that's bigger than, say, 3 people, if that's not you might be making a terrible mistake if none of that looks familiar. And although I'm not an expert, I would be glad to kind of help you along. Those are crucial jobs. And we should embrace this profession, this job. It is a proud and historical profession. Without it, we wouldn't have the pyramids. We would never have walked on the moon. Project management is valuable. The problem is that often our teams don't make the distinction. We're missing the point of production and the value of the skill of project management. We're losing out on both contributions, both on production and on project management, when we just assume it's all sort of the same thing. Don't get me wrong. Project management is a skill that many producers can and do use, along with other people in other roles. We call them development directors or software design managers or senior director managers, technical producers, that kind of stuff. They end up being in these roles. Anyone involved with the coordination and the delivery of these teams, this is all important. But frequently it's a skill, not necessarily a role. We need to respect this skill, respect the discipline of project management in the industry. There's training, certification, schools, entire conventions in Orlando, by the way, that just talk about, to celebrate and deal with this profession. I looked it up on Wikipedia. Wikipedia has 11,000 words on project management alone, which is about the same as computer rendering. I don't think that stands for, I think that stands for something. Wikipedia, basically, I've always wanted a computer renderer. I've always been looking for them, and I don't know that everybody is always looking for a deeply trained project management. Anyway, our team-wide expectations of how much work we can do or how much work we can't do is set by the value that our organizations put in the skill project management. Every time you see an eye roll at a schedule, we never ship on time, so why should we respect the schedule? This is because the teams don't respect the discipline. And it's too bad, because I think this is the key to solving crunch. I think project management is the key to solving overwork. It's here where it gets predicted. It's here where it gets highlighted. And also it's here where it gets mitigated, or it's basically here where it gets missed and we compensate with overwork. When we respect project management as the crucial discipline it is, with a measure, identify, improve tenets of professional project managers, then we will have taken an important step to solving the issues of mandatory crunch. It's not the only thing, of course. There's all sorts of things that go into this. But in my experience, it has been a lack of respect for basically the immovability of a calendar that's created issues where things like mandatory crunch show up. The alternative to respecting the professional discipline of project management is the idea that anyone can do it. Then the output is devalued as a subpart of somebody else's discipline. I hear things like, oh, I'm the engineer, but I also do the schedules. And I think, really? For the artists? For marketing? Everybody's got a schedule to keep to. I also hear a lot of, well, I don't have time to build a schedule, update my actuals, or learn what the hell a story point is. And then just move on, and they continue making the same mistakes. Teams around the world are saying that project management, this actual discipline of finishing things on time, is not important. Not important to make a dedicated and expert job out of it. So the role that helps out, the role that facilitates, gets this job heaped onto the other pile of things that they end up doing. When project management is not considered a real discipline, it's not somebody's only job to align methodology, to understand product status, to forecast delivery, mitigate issues, and deliver sometimes before it's too late. And now, the untrained producer is in charge of schedules too, and diluting the job of real producer to be the hub of the product, aligning the efforts and the initiatives in the surface of the amalgamated big picture. Again, we're talking about a double loss. I'm serious about to talk about overwork too. I know this is really sensitive, and I'll be glad to talk about it in further detail some other time. But given a seat at the table, the adult table, not the kids table, has anybody thought, like, in their team, like, oh, finally I get to be in all the important meetings, and then you realize that those meetings are not the important meetings. Those important meetings happen somewhere else. I feel like that actually kind of defines a lot of my career trajectory, but I might be projecting that on you. Anyway, so the real table, the adults table, and also with the respectful contribution from the rest of the team, this discipline will tell you really early on, the early warning systems are clear from this discipline, whether you're going to be able to meet your commitments, and it will also be able to give you the tools to find a solution if you're not able to do it. But keep in mind, surgery is risky without a knowledge of anatomy, and that's where producers come in. So let's close this sidebar that ended up being about half the talk. Don't sell this role short. Project management is the critical profession of measuring capacity, effort, and output. You can't forecast or improve without it. And isn't that important enough to be its own role, its own position, and its own director? We have art directors, creative directors, technical directors. Why don't we have schedule directors? Or maybe we do. Maybe we're not treating them right. Here's my advice. Hire a real project manager with real certification, with real school and real background in it. Or train the one on your team that's responsible for this. Get them certified. Make them an expert in this role. Treat it with respect, and then do what they say. Follow what the experts say. All right, let's get back to this. Now that we know what a producer should do, and maybe a little bit more than we're looking for what they don't do, let's talk about maybe you're asking, what's the best way I can work with my producer? The central hub of the product, the shepherd of the creative and the technical and the marketing vision. Well, working with producers is pretty much working with the same as working with all other humans. They're still human, I guess is my point. Producers are human. Assume good intent. Keep an open mind. And I always hesitate when I hear the advice, assume good intent, because I think a lot of people see that, well, I assume you have the best interest in the product and the best interest in the game. But my ideas, I think your ideas are dumb and my ideas are better because I like when we do things my way because they're really cozy with my biases. But I was open to the idea that you might have your own opinion. This is not what assume good intents and keep an open mind means. This means listen to what other people have to say. Sort of let that set in. Apply that to the entire context of the problem. Because as good as the right producer can make your life, it's not going to be a zero-effort deal. There might be changes. You possibly might have to contribute work to get to this level of quality and this utopia I'm describing. Be respectful of the role, the outputs required, and also, of course, always be respectful of the person. Establish role clarity. I have a very clear idea in my mind of what a producer does. If it's different from yours and we get to work right away without calibrating and without explaining to each other, we're going to end up in frustration. This frustration is born from unmatched expectations. All right, so let's talk about the spoons. A lot of this conversation has been leaning on establishing clarity, if you've kind of picked up on that. This is really important to me because remember, I'm a producer and producers are agents of clarity. I have a tool that I use for this, but it's not special. It's not new, it's not mine, and I feel a little bit weird actually standing up here on stage sort of going over it because it's so pedestrian in my mind, but I think it's important to talk about. I feel like Andrew invited me from Seattle to come down here. I'm going to stand on stage and go, soup. You know the best way to eat soup? With a spoon. Drop the mic and walk out. I think this is important, and it all kind of comes back to it. Anyway, when we're establishing the role and we're establishing the work, I use the RACI chart. How many people are familiar with the RACI chart? Spoons. How many people are familiar with spoons? There we go. All right. I'm sorry. I apologize. This particular thing came to me a long time ago, and it's actually the quickest way I can think about to build role clarity. Spoiler alert, it's not really that quick, because if you've ever had this conversation where you're developing and understanding each other's responsibilities and understanding each other's jobs, it can be touchy. It is a long and sometimes a grind of a conversation. But as long as you're assuming good intent and you've got an open mind, nothing has worked better for me than this. If you're not familiar, RACI is the acronyms are for R, responsibility, A, accountable, C, consulted, and I, informed. We'll go through it really, really quick, but I encourage you to look it up. There's plenty of information on it. So we're going to dig a ditch. Who do we get to dig a ditch? Who is responsible for digging the ditch? The shoveler. Thank you very much. One of his best roles. This is the person whose actual effort is directly results in the deliverable. This person is going to need the specs. The work this person does, this guy right here, he's going to dig the hole, right? He needs to have the specs. He needs to know how wide, how deep, what kind of dirt am I digging in. That information comes from somebody who is probably accountable, also maybe somebody else down this line. But right here, this is the accountable person. Who is accountable for the job? Who will keep track of progress and its coordination with other groups and the big picture? Always ready to explain the why and describe the context of the business or the endeavor. This person will be expected to justify their actions and their decisions. At Microsoft, they used to talk about, this is the person whose throat to choke. And I said, what about the hand to shake? What if I do a good job? Doesn't matter, by the way, in case you were curious, doesn't matter. Somebody worked at Microsoft, I can hear you laughing. C is consulted. I always consider this as the vet, the person that did this before. This is, I've done that before. I'll show you where the pitfalls are. I'll show you what you can do to help to work. They're not working on, this person's not digging the hole, but he's dug holes before. And he helps us get the best work early on. It's valuable, valuable stuff. Sometimes they can help you set context as well. Also something that the accountable person is interested in making connections with. Finally is informed. These are the people that they're not in the business of doing either, but they do need to know what's going on. Frequently it's a stakeholder. Sometimes it's just somebody that has a broader knowledge of something like code policy, and if something's going to violate code policy, then we need to keep them informed in what we're about to do, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. Often these are the people that might have downstream impacts. In case you couldn't tell who the producer is, remember what we said. Producers are producing something bigger than any single effort. This automatically makes them accountable. When working out this stuff with your colleagues, I would say double down on the details. Define the responsibilities. What's the thing that you're working on that no one else will be working on? I also think it's worth defining the methods. How should it be done? Also, what will happen if there's a problem? This is my favorite picture in this talk. I don't know, this one, I don't know. That's great. That's good work, Nick. It's the internet. Also, how do we prevent problems like this from happening in the future? I like the idea of the post-mortem of, all right, so the fire extinguisher, it lit on fire. Everybody saw that, right? Oh, yeah, saw that. Another thing to do is be clear with what you need to do your best work. The producer is probably most ideally suited to address the needs that you have. Like, do you feel happy when there are snacks around? Or are you a high information type of person? Missing meetings gives you hives. A good producer should be able to accommodate all these different styles. Also, be clear on what you need to do for the producer, so that they can do their best work in supporting you and the team. This is, you'll find that participation in production is not for them, and it's not for you. It's actually for the broader team. It's for this context that I keep talking about, this bigger picture that gets us somewhere where we want to be, great games. You will need to spend some effort to work with your producer and to help your producer. You'll have to do something that probably isn't your normal specialty. We've all heard stories about I just want to do art. Don't bother me with the other stuff. Well, if you want that art to be seen by people and to run in a perfect game, then you're going to be able to need to do something that's outside of your normal specialty. Like, give the gift of status. I always say, can I have the gift of status? All I want to know is kind of where you are. And again, don't turn it into you don't want to nag people, but sometimes that's part of the job. Another question that might be coming up is this the same at all levels? Because, Nick, it sounds like you're talking about executives at Microsoft or EA or Amazon, and just it doesn't work because I have a small team. What about these junior producers or these new people that they're just happy to be here? Does all this sort of role clarity mean anything? And what's my sphere of influence? My answer is yes, all levels. At all levels, even if you're by yourself. If you were here in 2016, one of my points of the talk is leadership exists at all levels, even if it's just you by yourself. This kind of conversation exists everywhere. prepared to understand what your sphere of influence is. You can go back and you can use the RACI chart. Expect to have an area, a feature, a thing that needs to be delivered on time, on budget, meets the established quality bar. You could be delivering pizza for lunch or a multiplayer-backed system ready to withstand millions of players. Working with people, establishing clarity, aligning to a vision, it's all still the same. So now you might be thinking, how about becoming the producer? I think it's a pretty common path, and a lot of people see this as I go from being an individual contributor. I'm an artist now, creating art, and then you become a production lead, where you're overseeing others in your discipline, and ultimately you become this producer across disciplines, and it's that easy because you just know. I actually, frankly, caution people. I don't say don't do this, but I say be really, really careful about a choice like this. If you have a value, or if you have a specialty in something else, if you're already an expert, there are so many ways to be successful and contribute and to make great products and get paid well and make people happy. This one feels a little bit risky. Frankly, if you look at a game team, there are a lot less producers there than there are other roles. This one is a little bit risky. But if you're a certain type of person, this can be very rewarding. And so I will say, be relentless about establishing clarity. It is the core of your job. Understand everybody's perspective. This is part of understanding clarity. Their objectives, their discipline. Does anybody recall a couple years ago, there was a judge that learned how to code, learned how to computer program, because he was overseeing a Google patent case. And they went through the first, they started getting into it, and they basically took a break. He went off and learned how to JavaScript up a page or something like that, and came back. This is the kind of mindset that you might need to adopt. If you've never done anything like this, you don't have to be an expert. You just need to be able to stay in the conversation. Don't try and bend reality to your will. That's not any way to build relationships. And building relationships is an important part of this role. Building relationships, because you need to be able to speak to all different disciplines, all different ways. I'm not saying make friends. I'm saying build relationships. Also, spend more time in meetings. Yay! Was that? I came here for this. If you really want to be a producer and you really need to be ready to represent or interact with people of other disciplines, you're going to need to spend time with them. You're going to need to understand their communication styles and how to represent them and how to talk to them, and often how to translate between them. Once you're helpful and you learn all the players, and you got QA, PR, marketing, artists, engineers, HR, you're going to quickly find that it feels like they're all playing different sports and you're the only one with stripes on. So being able to take the issues and the objectives and the disciplines and priorities from an artist and be able to translate them into a reasonable, rational conversation with an engineer is really what this is all about. And I use those two examples because everybody kind of understands that difference. But trust me, I've had conversations between, HR and engineers, and they still don't speak the same language. It's one of your roles is to be there in the middle. You'll quickly find that you'll have to transition between all these sports, and so be prepared. When a producer needs to be able to articulate the why, the what, and the when at any moment at their level, and at least stay in the conversation of the how. So my challenge to you is, if this is something that you're interested in, show up to the next meeting prepared. Go to the next optional meeting you're an artist and you were invited to a bunch of conversations with engineers. Go to that thing. Familiarize yourself with the details, read all the documentation, show up with a notebook, maybe even some ideas. Because if you want to be a producer, that is effectively the rest of your life. This one's a little bit touchy along the lines of giving advice to being here, to becoming a producer. I say, because sometimes you don't always have the option at smaller studios. Try to avoid becoming a producer of the group you were once embedded in. A small version of this is experienced in some sort of school training cohorts. They go off and they do a couple of games, work in a group. And since you're all kind of students at the same level, When you have to become the producer and you end up having this perspective and you end up needing to give direction, that can be difficult. Now imagine that amplified by like 1,000 and have lots of real money involved. It gets really touchy. The reputation that you had before you became a producer, it was built in a different time under different constructs, and maybe that team, it might be hard for them to separate the old concept of the old concept artist from the new boss. Just be mindful of that. There's a way through it, but just be mindful of it. It doesn't work overnight. That was, I have direct experience in this. I think maybe this is helpful for all of us. Everybody that's making games or part of making games. Making great games is everybody's job. And we all do a little bit of production if we're doing our jobs right. We can all be part of the success story. And today's games require us to all be part of this success. Once we understand the part that we all play in production, it becomes easier to see the manifestation in the role of the producer. And it also helps us prepare for it when we want to transition into the role of producer. We can see that, acknowledge it, and then learn and then kind of grow into it. All right, what did we learn? We learned that producers should be the ties that bind a team, all its expertise, all its experts, all of it together. And also, the head of the product and the head of the area accountable for its delivery. We also learned that assigning project management as a subtask is a recipe for disaster. And of course, giving no authority to those in accountable roles is also a recipe for disaster. Role clarity is the key. And there are such things as blended roles. They do exist, but we need to be clear. And sometimes we just need to declare which hat we're wearing. Small teams, people wear many hats, but sometimes you have to say, today I am being the producer, today I am being the engineer, and you have to compartmentalize. I think if you want the job opportunity, it's there for you. There's plenty of it. You just build credibility with the team, build credibility with the industry around you, and remember that this is the epitome of leadership. You guide visions, you encourage with the backup of experts, you set goals, and then you divert all the credit, and then you take all the blame. I really was serious that everybody else gets the credit because they're responsible. You're accountable. It can be lonely. It's a lonely role for some people, but for certain people like me, I'd love to help make great things happen and see passionate experts realize their full potential and to see the truth in the statement that a team is greater than the sum of its parts. It can be the right fit. And when considered this way, no team should ever say, why do we need a producer? Or how can we make it better? That's it. Thank you very much. Yeah!